I'm not very keen in English too, because as Rhonda said, I learned English in down New Orleans, as they say, where I just come from, because yesterday I was having a conference in Alliance Française in New Orleans. The theme was different. It was about the New Yorker, as you mentioned, because there was two possibilities in this little tour of the United States. Even speaking of my New Yorker experience, or that's the first time today that I'm supposed to tell to say a little about my life. Unfortunately, I must say it's not 30 years of publishing, but 40, because, well, I just found out it's 42 exactly. So I started when I was 8, I must say. So I don't know if my life is very interesting, but we're going to go fast through the first to explain you how it all happened. So I was a student in Lyon, my hometown, and I made a small law school, and I didn't finish it because I was very fan of jazz. So I decided to go to New Orleans in 1964, I think. And it was the most terrible year of my life, because I came there without any permit to work, and but it helped me a lot not to have this permit, because I learned English by I had to as we say in French, to débrouille myself, as we say in the sky. Is everybody speaks a little French? Because I'm going to mix, not only my French is mixing, is always mixed with my English, because of the Sky, my husband. I will tell you why later. But can I say sometimes some words in French, if you don't mind? Okay. So I learned a lot of things in New Orleans. Very bad English first, because I was a waiter at the Royal Orleans, and remember the first word I learned was always the word fuck, because they were always saying fucking something, fucking, you are fucking the waiter, and that's why today, 40, 50 years later, I'm not very good again in English. And no, I must say that it was a very good experience for me, because the consul of France at the time was very nice with me. His secretary was married. I remember she was French. She was married to a Honduran dentist who didn't speak a word of French. So I was teaching him French, and he was taking care of my teeth. And the consul found me a job, which was my first job was a clerk at the Maison Blanche, who was a big store, who has disappeared now in New Orleans. And they put me in the return, how do you say that, le département, the claim return, where when you buy something and it's wrong, you go and claim. And I was the guy. They were talking to me, so I didn't understand a word of English. So I think they find the right guy. That was my first. That was my first job. And after that, I made a lot of money as a waiter at the New Orleans hotel. And my English was so poor at the time that the tips were always good, because I made it on purpose too. For instance, instead of saying, for instance, don't push my leg, don't pull my leg, I was saying, don't push my leg. And in that case, the tip was double. Well, anyway, so I went back to France, because as I say, I made a lot of money. It was a real good experience. And I came back as a hero in my little city of Lyon. And I was supposed to work as every young man of this city, which is very famous not only for the food but for the silk. I was supposed to work on a silk company, and I was just going to start this, and the destiny was different, because one friend friend of my father who was a lawyer. My father was a lawyer of a big publisher in Paris, and they were looking for a young guy who could speak some words of English, which at the time was quite unusual to find a young man, even in the big school like ENA or Polytechnic. Nobody spoke a word of English. So that was my chance, and I started in Hachette, which is the biggest publishing company, as the responsible of the copyright. At the time, copyrights, it was a new, what should I say, I had the good idea to understand that the copyright was the future of exporting the culture out of France. Before the copyright business, it was only exporting. So, for instance, I remember my first job was to translate Babar the Elephant, which was a Hachette Laurent de Bruneuf, in 29 languages. Before we started this copyright company inside Hachette, Babar was only exported and not translated. So that was my great chance. It was not only Babar, but Françoise Sagan, the magazine Elle, who was part of Hachette, and so on. So I have the chance to be the to start this job, and it worked quite well, I must say. But I'm going to tell you one or two anecdotes to show you how I was not very good, and I'm still not very good in figures, for instance. I still don't know the difference between the turnover and the VAT, you know, after 40 years of publishing. But I always succeeded to make a little, as we say in France, a little pirouette. For instance, of course, I like publishing itself, the books, the culture. I was reading a lot, but I did not know a word. I didn't know how to count, and I still don't know how to count. I give you an example. At the time, the chairman of Hachette was Simon Nora, and he liked me. Well, he liked me because I was supposed to do a good job. And he was the cousin of a very famous American, I think you know, Felix Ruatin, who used to be, he was an ambassador of the United States 10 years ago in France, but he was the cousin of my chairman. And at the time, he was a big banker in New York. And my chairman said, oh, Jean-Loup, there's a big company on sale in the United States called Bantam. I think Hachette should be interested to buy it. So why don't you fly? And I took the Concorde, I remember. Why don't you fly to see my cousin, Felix Ruatin, in New York, and discuss about him, about buying eventually Bantam. So I did it, but I was very upset because I couldn't speak about figures. I could speak about books. I knew because why Babar was interesting for Bantam, or the characters of Bantam should be interesting for Hachette. So Mr. Ruatin fortunately spoke a very good French, but he invited me. I remember in the Rockefeller Center, we were sitting, both of us, in a dining room, and we start talking about publishing. That was good for me, but I knew he was going to talk about figures. So I bought before in the Fifth Avenue a little recording machine, which I put discreetly in my pocket, and every time he was speaking, the little machine was on. And when he was talking about figures, I said, yes, of course, I understand. I didn't understand a word. So, and after the conversation, I went back to my hotel. At the time, Hachette was a very big company with very good, they had the possibility to pay us the Pierre, which is still, I think, one of the best hotels of New York. And I remember I took my machine and I wrote down I was on the machine about the figures, and I sent a fax to my friend in Paris, and they interpreted it for me. And when I came back and I had to report to the board of Hachette, I learned it by heart, and I explained why the figures were so and so, and it worked. All my life was like this. Even tonight, you'll see, because I'm inventing everything. Another anecdote, which is more, well, I say Mr. Nora was the chairman, but there was another man who was the president. It was a member of the Hachette family, le Marquis de Roquemorel. Well, at the time, Marquis was, he was more Marquis than president at the time. And he always wanted me to go with him all over the world, which was nice because he didn't speak a word of English. Even my poor English was supposed to help him. And one time we came to New York, I remember, with his wife, who was very charming. And he was very snobbish, but she was charming. And when we were in New York, in Le Pierre, I remember, some journalists, we didn't know at all what Hachette, and they didn't were interested about Hachette. They were more interested about the fact that Mr. de Roquemorel was a marquis, and she was a marquise. So they came to the hotel to interview the marquise, and I was with her, and I remember the first question they asked her, they say, how do you become a marquise? And she said, a marquise is the son of a dead marquise, which I think was a very good explanation. Well, when I was back to New Orleans, I must say that I had the chance, when I was not working at the Royal Orleans, to be the interpreter of at the Dixieland Hall. I had 2 sentences to say every night. It was not the Preservation Hall, of course, that you all know, but there was another hall called the Dixieland Hall, and at the time I had the possibility and the opportunity to meet every night. There was Paul Barberin, there was Placide Adams, all these big jazzmen, and the sentence I had to translate for the eventual French tourist was say, and now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you the Dixieland Hall, the Dixieland Jazz Band just returned from a long tour of Europe. And I discovered that the tour of Europe was 30 years before. So every night I was saying this. So after that, in 1981, I resigned from Hachette. I had a very good, very interesting life, but I resigned from Hachette because I'm very independent, and everybody was telling me, you're very good in copyright, you should create your own company, copyright company. So I did, and it was a terrible flop, because I discovered that when I was traveling all over the world, I was first Hachette, and my name Chiflet, nobody was interested by me. And I remember when I was flying when I was flying to Japan, when I was Hachette, I was invited by the big bosses. And when I resigned, because I resigned 2 times from Hachette, because first time in 1981, I resigned, I created my own company. It was a terrible flop, and I discovered, as I was just saying, that when I was going to Japan, for instance, on my own, nobody was interested by me. So it was a very good lesson for me of humility. But I start to stay alive in being a consultant like this. And finally, Hachette asked me to come back, and they say, please come back, we need you. So I did come back to Hachette, and at the time Larousse made me a good offer, so I went to Larousse, and I resigned from Larousse because I was very excited to try to create my own company. So in 1985, I created for the first time my own company called Bookmaker. Bookmaker was a packaging company. That means it's not exactly publishing, but you don't have your own imprint, but you invent books and you sell the idea to publishers, and it worked quite well. But at the same time, there was a big convention in Japan where I did with all the French publishers, and it's at that time, in 1984, I think, that happened, an event which changed my life, I must say. It happened like this. We were in Tokyo, in Kyoto, I remember, visiting temples, and I was visiting some temples, and suddenly I joined a group of French publishers, and they were looking for me. And at the time, somebody said, "Oh, you came without shouting station," which doesn't mean anything, of course, as you know, in English. Mais en français, in French, it was the literal translation of "Tu es arrivé sans crier gare," you know. So in English, I understand that you cannot understand what it means, but it was very funny for the French, we start playing that game, translating literally English sentence or French sentence, excuse me, in English, but it doesn't mean anything. And for instance, we were saying a typical idiom in French. We say "et ta sœur," which means "and your sister." It doesn't mean anything in English, but in French, "et ta sœur" means something. But the most interesting was "ciel mon mari." Ciel mon mari, you say "ciel mon mari" when, for instance, a wife is in the bed with his lover, and suddenly her husband gets in the room, and she says, "Oh, heavens, my husband." But "heavens, my husband," it means something in English. But if you say sky, my husband, of course, it doesn't mean anything. So we played a lot, and it was very funny. And everybody said, "Oh, you should do a book on this," and so on. And I did a little book, that's the second edition. But let me show you. That's the first edition. And you see the cartoon. That's exactly illustrating what I'm just saying. Sky my husband. So this little book had a little success. The idea was I'm going to give you some, for instance, if you say it's cabbage, doesn't mean anything in English, but it's a translation of "c'est son chouchou." Chou à la crème, I was translating that, but cabbage at the cream. But the real translation in English is cream puff. If you say, I have nothing to polish, doesn't mean anything in English, but in France, rien à cirer means not to give a damn. And for instance, not to be in one's plate doesn't mean anything in English, but it's a literal translation of ne pas être dans son assiette, and so on. So this book had a little success. I made a second one, so that's the one. And finally, 3 years, but you see, in that time, it was just a little cartoon and the sentence in English. But 3 years later, I made this one, Guide de l'anglais courant, Guide of the running English, which doesn't mean anything. And I had the good idea to put, that was the difference with the former edition, to put the good translation in English. So the first edition, as the blue one and the red one, had a small success of 3,000 copies each. And this one, since I put the good translation, and here you have it, that's Sky, my wife, I will tell you what is it. You see, for instance, ça ne mange pas de pain, it doesn't eat bread, okay? But the good translation, it's not important. Or this one is very difficult to translate, but I love it. A béni oui oui. In France, if you translate it literally in English, means a bless yes yes. And in English, it means a yes man. Or, for instance, if you say it's not the sea to drink, doesn't mean anything in English, but it's the translation of ce n'est pas la mer à boire. And I gave the good translation in English, which is it's not that difficult. If you say, for instance, il y a du monde au balcon, there is some word at the balcony, you won't understand, but I give you the good translation, means it's big busted. Busted, c'est ça l'expression? The big one, okay? For instance, so this book, this one, I just made it for fun, but this book had at the time a fantastic success. The two former editions that I show you, just as I was just saying, did only 3,000 copies each, and this one meant 300,000 copies. It was a tremendous success. We are in the 1986. Why? Because I thought that the French teachers, the teachers who were teaching English in France, would be furious about me, and it was all the contrary. They were enthusiastic. They said that's the good way to learn English, and it worked very well. So after Sky My Husband, I did Sky My Wife, which is the contrary. And this may be, for instance, if you say in English, my goose is cooked, I was translating myself by mon noix est cuite, which doesn't mean anything in French. But if I make the good translation, je suis fait comme un rat. That's the good translation in French. If you say, for instance, it's all Greek to me, c'est tout grec pour moi, the pupils remember that it's tout grec pour moi, it's funny for them because it doesn't mean anything in French. And I put the good translation, which is in French, pour moi c'est du chinois. Or if you say se rafraîchir les talons is a translation of to cool one's heels. And in the good word in French is poireauter, it means to wait. Hot dog, that's a very, very famous, it's a chien chaud, you know all the So after the success of Sky My Husband and Sky My Wife, I did too many Sky. I think I made Sky My Kids, Sky, this one. No, let me tell you about this one. Non, voilà, non, ça non, c'est à, excusez-moi. Oh là là, non, c'est pas du tout ça. Je reviens en arrière. Voilà. This one is still very. I put it now here because it's the one which is the most. It's very. It's still on the market. Very. It's selling very well these days in France. This is a famous character in France called Blake and Mortimer. This is Mortimer, and the other one is Blake. So I bought the rights of Blake and Mortimer, and I made, sorry, yes, this is, for instance, you see, I'm, what should I say, I bought the illustration of these very, very famous comic strips in France, and this is, for instance, the illustration of the version of Sky My Wife. For instance, you see the plane, the guy in the plane is saying, je suis sur le 9e nuage, which doesn't mean anything in French. But it's a translation. We say in France, je suis au 7e ciel, and you say, I'm on cloud 9. So the translation in French is, je suis sur le 9e nuage. And everybody in France will remember that this sentence, which is funny for us, je suis sur le 9e nuage, it doesn't mean anything. But we can see here that it's translated by I'm on cloud 9. For instance, this one, you can see, it says, ça prend le gâteau, which is, it takes the cake. You see, but ça prend le gâteau in France doesn't mean anything. Or in French, the good translation of ça prend le gâteau is c'est le bouquet. So this book is, so I say Ciel Blake, Sky Mortimer, Name of a Pipe, Nom d'une pipe. I'm sorry to say, I just brought one picture of one of these, but it's just to show you that explain how Sky My Husband had made many, was so successful that maybe I made too many books about it, but it still works. For instance, so this book was published in 1985, no, in 2003, sorry, and now we have been selling maybe more than 100 copies of each, which is very important, good for France. Ça souffle sur les here he says, I'm sorry, I can't, yes, I can move. Ça souffle sur les toiles d'araignée. Doesn't mean anything in French. but it's a translation of it blows away the cobwebs. And in France, it means ça rafraîchit les idées. Here you can see, he says, stone the corbeaux, c'est-à-dire, vous voyez, je ne sais plus, j'arrive pas à lire ici. Comment j'ai traduit stone the corbeau? Pierre au corbeau, doesn't mean anything. In France, we say 22. The chips are done. This is a very famous. Les jeux sont faits, and here I put the translation, les frites sont en bas, which doesn't mean nothing in French, of course. That's the idea of Sky My Husband, which has changed my life, because when I had this success with Sky My Husband, I decided to try to write down some other books, and it gave some ideas, some other authors, like because I understood that the good idea, since the teachers were supporting me, that I understood at the time, and it was the idea of the rest of my life of publisher, that the good idea was to teach with fun. So I met at the time a guy called Jean-Loup Chiflet, which was, which still is, a very famous TV and humorist in France, TV writer and humorist. And he was so excited by Sky My Husband, he said, why we should maybe do some other books, not only in English, but we should teach grammar or mathematics with fun. So he did a book called My Grammaire Impertinente, and it was a great success. Let me explain you how it worked, for instance. For instance, the idea was, I give some, for instance, l'article. Il sait, for instance, l'adjectif en français. Je vous le lis en français. Il y a deux sortes d'adjectifs, l'adjectif qualificatif et l'adjectif déterminatif. Les adjectifs qualificatifs expriment une qualité. And that was the typical grammar, the serious grammar. And after that, he was giving a very funny example. For instance, ambiance lourde au couvent, mère Marie de la crucifixion soupçonne sœur Jeanne de la rédemption de s'être servie de son vernis à ongles. So, and he explained la qualité de l'ambiance du couvent est d'être lourde. So you can understand that he is using very funny examples to teach grammar. For instance, another one, this one, for instance, which I'm sorry, because if it's difficult to explain this in English, what should I say about this one? Le verbe exprime une action ou un état. Exemple, drame de la vengeance, en tombant, l'arbre a écrasé le bûcheron qui venait de l'abattre. Tombant, a écrasé, et abattre exprime une action. Bon, pour ceux qui ne comprennent pas le français, c'est difficile à comprendre, mais en français, c'est très drôle. Et on a développé beaucoup de livres. We have developed many books on the same principle of serious rules and funny examples. So Jean-Loup Chiflet, after la grammaire française, made les mathématiques aussi avec with serious rules and funny examples, and it still worked very well. So now this is the first another books which I did at the time, Tintin et les secrets de la grammaire anglaise. Same principle. I did go to buy the rights of Tintin, and I did that with Arabs, and I did exactly the same principle that I was just showing you with Blake and Mortimer. You see, l'affirmation. So my company, Bookmaker, was the first to use funny comics. You see, it's difficult for you to read maybe, but you see l'affirmation, For instance, here Tintin is saying, this is the I can't read, I'm sorry, because I'm not very good in I should have said, so this is avec l'affirmation, avec be, avec un auxiliaire, avec have. That's the way to learn the difference between to be and to have. So that was the same principle. So it worked very well with Tintin, but it was very difficult to deal with the Tintin Foundation. And now it would be they are all keeping their eyes for themselves. But at the time, it was very exciting to work with them. This is another book which is now appearing in pocket form, as you can see. L'anglais saugrenu. I'm going to give you some example. It was translated, it's still translated in English, called C'est pour mon crapaud. Why? Because I'm going to give you some example of what is long. I don't know how we should translate l'anglais saugrenu. I would say maybe l'anglais bizarre. So it was, for instance, at la boucherie. You see, that is the inside of the book, à la boucherie, at the butcher's. So, the French sentence say, excusez-moi, Madame la bouchère, mais je dois vous signaler que votre poitrine avait un drôle de goût. So, if you translate in English, it gives, excuse me, but I must tell you how strange your breast tasted. Alors, after that, the butcher says, je crois que je vais essayer votre culotte. I think I will try your rump, because culotte, that's the word. You see, I was playing always on the bizarre, on the ambiguities of the language. Je vois que vous avez 2 jolis pieds de cochon. Combien coûtent-ils? I see you have 2 nice pig's feet. How much are they? Donnez-moi 2 kilos de palettes. C'est pour mon beau-frère, il est peintre. I was playing on the word palette, which means something in palette is a part of the beef, et palette is the same word for the painter. Bonjour, monsieur le boucher, je crois que je vais prendre vos 2 oreilles et votre queue. Good morning, I'd like those 2 ears and that tail you've got, please. And the vocabulary I was giving in each page of this kind of books was always, I was always choosing some unusual words. For instance, à la boucherie, contrefilet, haut de côte, fusil, sharpening stick, jambonneau, couteau à désosser, saignant, jarret, cervelle, caissière. Well, it was published in English, but by a very nice publisher called Michael O'Mara, and they called it C'est pour mon crapaud. I never understood why they had translated it like this. Anyway, after that, always in the same running, I would say, skiing on the same idea, as we say in France. This was a very great, a good success. J'apprends l'anglais avec la reine. There is a little anecdote with that book, because it was published just 10 years ago when Diana, the Princess Diana died. And I remember that, no, that's not, sorry. No, I'm sorry. Je vais revenir en arrière. No. En arrière, pardon. Voilà. Mais non, mais pourquoi voilà. J'apprends l'anglais avec la reine. Alors, j'apprends l'anglais avec la reine. Why I'm talking about this poor Diana? The idea I'm going to leave to read you some example of that book. The idea was to, as the title said, I learned English with the Queen. And at the time, so for instance, let me tell you, for instance, the chapter called Singulier pluriel. Comme en français, le pluriel anglais se forme en ajoutant un S au singulier. Exemple, a king, 2 kings, 3 clowns. Un roi, 2 rois, 3 clowns. Si l'objet complément appartient en commun au sujet, il restera au singulier comme en français. Example, the Chiracs came with their caravan. Les Chiracs sont venus en caravane. Donc c'était, I was supposing with that book that the Queen was teaching me, I was learning English with the Queen. But I made some very, I had previously written some bad, funny sentences about this poor Diana, and when the book was published, it was exactly the same week that Diana died. So I rushed to the printer to change all the bad sentences about Diana by Camilla or Sarah. So, for instance, other example, a lot of means beaucoup, a bit means un peu. Beaucoup peut également se traduire par a lot of. Example, Sarah owes me a lot of money. Sarah me doit beaucoup d'argent. Un peu peut aussi se traduire par a bit, mais uniquement comme adverbe lorsqu'il modifie un adjectif. Example, the Majors, at the time it was John Major was Prime Minister. The Majors were nice but a bit vulgar. Les majeurs étaient gentils mais un peu vulgaires. Et, mais si les sujets, alors, other example, for instance, it's interesting that in France we say les Jospin, alors qu'en anglais on ajoute un S au nom propre. C'est vrai qu'on dit, en anglais on dit the Kents with a S, the Blairs with a S, et I was giving an example, the Gaddafis came on their bicycles, les Gaddafis sont venus à bicyclette. I understand for you it's not too easy to understand that, but for the French, to learn English with some funny examples like this was quite successful, because this book was is still used by the teachers, because now it exists too in a pocket edition. Now this is a little parenthesis. That's two books which I wrote. This one, Un si gentil petit garçon. It's not very funny, but it's my story when I was a little boy in Lyon with my mother, who is still alive, which is now 95. And this book is just published this week in pocket by Le Seuil, which I'm very glad to know, because it's a book which I wrote in which I wrote 10 years ago, and now Le Seuil, which is a big company in France, thought that it was interesting to republish it under pocket form. It's a story of a little boy, I was, en français, un si gentil petit garçon. I was supposed to be a very nice little boy, which I think it's not the same now. And La Femme du Train is not an erotic book, but it's a novel which I wrote about 15 years ago. It's a story of a man facing a woman in a train. So that means that I'm trying sometimes to write down some serious books, which not only books about words and which is difficult for me, as you can see, to explain. But La Femme du Train, it's a story of a man facing a woman in a train, and they don't say anything to each other, but they are a little phantasming. I don't know if that's the word in English. Sorry? Fantasizing. And when the train stopped, the woman, she left the train, and she said dommage. So it's too bad. Voilà. This book was was quite successful. This one, it's a very funny book which didn't work at all. But you're going to. The idea was the following. I'm sorry. Voilà. Y a-t-il une courgette dans l'attaché caisse? I discovered that there were about 1,200 English words, French words English words in French. That's what we call le franglais, but I discovered too that there are about as many French words which are used in English. That's what we should call the Franglish. So I decided to make a book where I was mixing the Franglish and the Franglais. And I was saying, if you mix these 1,200 English words and 1,200 French words, you can make some sentence which would be understood by either by French and either by English, and you will be bilingual. So the sentences was, for instance, the lady has a lot of savoir-vivre, but she's a completely gaga. So lady is English, savoir-vivre is French, and gaga is French too. But gaga is supposed to be used in English. It's a faux pas to play with a hula hoop in the salle d'armes. Faux pas is a French word which is used in English, but not by everybody, but faux pas, it's part of what we call Franglish. Hula hoop is a word, it's an English word which is used in French, and so on. I am not a blasé dandy, but the ketchup on this hamburger is very cliché. So everybody is supposed to understand that. A soigné doctor gives me a réchauffé billet doux for a rendezvous in the wigwam. That's it. The crème caramel in the charter is poignant, and there is an orifice in the Gruyère sandwich of the tunnel. Well, as you can see, it's not so easy to understand, and I think the public didn't understand at all because it didn't work at all. Let me give you another one. The nonchalance of the elite in the Tilbury is very cool. But I think it was a bad idea, but for me it was funny. Now, so when Rhonda say I wrote down, it was more than 50 books, unfortunately 60. Sometimes I say I'm not a writer. Sometimes when somebody asks me, you are a writer, I say no, I'm not a writer. I am committing books because I don't think that this kind of books are made by. It's not. C'est pas l'œuvre d'un écrivain. It's just commettre un book et écrire un livre. C'est pas la même chose. The next one, this book has been republished many times. This, I'm going to give you some examples. I wrote it with a girl called Nathalie Christie, which worked at Larousse, which is very funny. And this book has been published and republished many times, and I give you to explain to give you the principle. Sorry. Now is published under another name called Le Mot qui manquait. This, for instance, we invented with Nathalie some French words because we decided, we thought that there was a lot of words which are missing in the French vocabulary. For instance, we invented the word purgatiroir. What is a purgatiroir? Purgatiroir, we take the word purgatoire and the word tiroir. The purgatiroir it's the tiroir in the drawer when you put all your stuff, you know, and when you don't know what to do with a pencil, with some bits of anything, and it's called the purgatiroir. We invented, for instance, the chi-yo-yo. What is the chi-yo-yo? The yo-yo is something like this, you see, you play with, and chi is from chien. The chi-yo-yo is this stuff that you have with your dog, you know, I don't know, it's a leash that we call that the chi-yo-yo. We invented the word fiascado, from fiasco and cadeau. When you offer something to somebody and he's very well, it's en français on dit c'est un bide. We call that a fiascado. We invented the word the fiascote. Fiascote. What is the fiascote? You take a biscuit and the word fiasco. When you try to butter your biscuit, and of course every time it breaks. That's the kind. We invented the mot testiculation. I'm sorry, this is not testiculation. It's very French. You see, the French, they always do this to take their testicles to put them right or wrong, or I don't know, right or left. That's the word testiculation. We invented the word illoiement. Illoiement. That's very French. That's Alain Delon. In French, when you don't know how to say tu ou vous, you take the word il. Et comment va-t-il? Instead of, if I do not dare to say you, tu, comment tu vas? Or I say maybe vous, it's too strong. I say, et comment va-t-elle? And in France, Alain Delon is very known to say, when he speaks of him, he say, il va bien, Alain Delon, il est bien, etc. Ça, c'est l'illoiement. We invented some other words. Le fax terrier, I like this one. The fax terrier, it's not the fox terrier, but fax terrier. It's when you, well, now it's fax, it's over, but when you were waiting for a fax, near the fax machine, you know. And the fax terrier is somebody who is waiting for a fax. I call him a fax terrier. The crialomanie, it's when you are waiting for, when you talk to somebody from Atlanta to Paris. Well, the phone is working as well from Paris to Paris, but we noticed that the people, when you're talking to somebody very far, vous criez. So it's like crialomanie. Hello, hello. You see? That's very French too. Accaparé. Accaparé, it's when you walk in the streets of Paris with what we call the caca chien, the terrible. J'aime beaucoup celle-ci. I like this one, escalatorero. When you took the escalator in the wrong, to say, like a torero, the escalator machine in the wrong, dans le mauvais sens. So you are like a torero. Or you have a concupiscence. Pizza and concupiscence. When you are at the restaurant, you always think that you would have preferred the pizza of the guy besides you. The récalcitrant, citron et récalcitrant, it's when you try to get the citron in the Perrier like this, you see? You have the gambada. The gambada, it's when you are in a very hot beach, and you work like it's too hot, so you make gambada, you know, because you cannot put, it's between lambada and gambada. One I like very much is aikudo. When you are in a plane, in a train, aikudo, you try to get l'accoudoir for you, so you are, you see. And a last one, this is tartabou, yes, the word taboo and tarte pie. When you are invited, in a dinner, there is always, at the end, there is always one piece of pie, and nobody wants to take, dares to take it, so it's taboo. So it's taboo, you see. And this is very, for the males only, well, it's very French too, because we have a lot of Vespasienne in France. Urisphère is when the guys, the men are in a Vespasienne, what's say, pissotière in France. Urisphère, that's where they look upstairs, like, not upstairs, but they look up because they don't dare to look down. You say urisphère. C'est la sphère qui. What should I say? Ah, yes, glaçouille. That's when you glaçouille, it's from the word, you see, when you take your children to, well, that's in Paris, but maybe here too, or in France. It's when you buy an ice cream at the Luxembourg or what, and you buy an ice cream, the person who is selling the ice cream, before to take the ice with something like this to put, he is supposed to clean the stuff in a very terrible liquid, which is disgusting, and I thought, God, that's a glaçouille. Well, that's it for this book. Garamnésie, last one. Garamnésie, garage et amnésie, when you get in a parking and you don't know where, you have forgotten where's your car. Garamnésie. And this book is still now on the market. It's called, as I was telling you, Mots qui manquaient. That was the first edition. A last one, sexual one to finish. Capostrophe. Capostrophe is capote, it's a French letter, as you say, no? A catastrophe. That means when you are trying to get, to put up or down, I don't know, a capote, and it doesn't work. Condom, sorry, condom. Capostrophe, and then when you don't succeed to put it. And calvaire, casqueté, absolumentiste. What should I say? The last one. Well, that's it. Maybe it's too. I don't want to. Let me give you another one. Yes, purée, purée. That's the children. When you get a purée, pomme de purée, you see the children have, with their fork, they make some rails, pure rails. You see, when they play. Well, it's they play with. And morvodrome is morve from the nose. What you call that? Yes, and morvodrome. That's where an hippodrome. You have les chevaux, an hippodrome. And you have le morvodrome. That's where the morph comes down. That's it. Now let's come to something much more funny. This one. This is a great book, a very small book. Sky, Mr. Allgood. In 1994, sorry. Our Minister of Culture, maybe some people here have heard of him, Mr. Toubon, decided to make a law the idea of the Loi Toubon was to forbid English in the French language, not all the English, but lots of words of English, because he thought there were too many English words in French. So first of all, I tried to call him Allgood. Of course, it was easy to say Toubon Allgood, and I published these little books, which was I will show you maybe later. I have a little. I think I have one of these here. This little book was to try to make fun of Mr. Toubon, because I thought it was a real scandal to do this law for many reasons. First, it was in 1994, in May 1994. The law was supposed to be voted in May 1994, and 1 month later, in June 1994, we were supposed, and we did, celebrate the 50th anniversary of the department, where all the Americans, the Anglo-Saxons, the Canadians came in France to be killed, of course, to help to solve. Well, they gave their life for France, and I think it was a very, very bad idea to choose this time of the year and this year to make a law to take out all English from France. So in two nights time, I wrote a little book called Sky, Mr. Allgood, and the day the law was supposed to be voted, with some friends of mine who was working at the French television, I went to the l'Assemblée nationale with 600 little books like this, which I gave to all the deputies before they were going to to vote the law. And what was in this law, in this book? I say because I thought that Mr. Toubon was mainly, not only he wanted to take out all these English words, but he had a committee who invented some stupid words, like instance, instead of nursery, which is used in France, we should say nourricerie, which is stupid. Nourricerie instead of. He said, for instance, that lifting, which is still used in France, we would say no more lifting, but remodelage. It's really stupid. So I invented a little dictionary which I It's inside that book. And I say, for instance, Mr. Toubon, now we won't say anymore, cette fille-là est too much, but cette fille-là, elle est trop beaucoup. Hein? On dira plus, we won't say anymore, je voudrais une paille pour boire mon peppermint, but je voudrais une paille pour boire ma menthe au poivre. On ne dira plus, je voudrais only you by the platters, but je voudrais seulement vous par les écuelles. Puisque platters, hein. On ne dira plus, chez Dupont et compagnie, les secrétaires travaillent en pool, but chez Dupont et compagnie, les secrétaires travaillent en piscine. Hein. We won't say anymore, elle n'avait rien sous son pullover, but elle n'avait rien sur son tir au-dessus, which is a literal translation of all the words that we use in French. We won't say anymore, je suis abonné à Paris Match, but je suis abonné à Paris Allumette. Hein. We won't say anymore when the saints go marching in, but quand les saints vont marcher dedans. So, Mr. Allgood, for instance, ces cover girls, on dira plus les cover girls de les filles couvertes, on ne dira plus ce mec is a vrai baba cool, but ce mec est un vrai baba frais. And so Mr. Toubon was furious. He was very, very angry about me, but all this was appeared on le soir de TV Magazine sur TF1 with Poivre d'Arvor, who show me at the Assemblée Nationale. And the worst thing for Mr. Toubon was that I went after that to the bar of the Assemblée Nationale, and I say, I would like, please, I would like un écossais sur les rochers instead of un scotch on the rocks. So I say, I would like a Bloody Mary. Je voudrais une Marie saignante. And that was appeared at the journal de Poivre d'Arvor. And it was a fantastic success. And the waiter was so stupid, he couldn't understand me. I was telling him, he said, what do you mean by a Marie saignante? I say, I mean that in 1 hour, after the vote of the law, you would have to sell a Marie saignante. But what is a Marie? It's a Bloody Mary, but you won't say anymore. So I understand, said the guy. It was so funny that it appeared of course, in the BBC, and I was invited like a hero the week after in England, because I had saved the Loi Toubon, which has been voted anyway, but I must say that we still, as you know, using most of the English words in the French language. Like we're still saying Bloody Mary, we're still saying a scotch on the rocks, we're still saying the platters, and rock around the clock, and we're still saying rock and roll, et non pas le balancer rouler, which is or his mom, I was saying, Mr. Toubon, are you a member of the Rotary? Are you a member of the Rotatif? So, last one, Marcel Duchamp has invented the ready-made. We must say now, Marcel Duchamp a inventé le pré-fait. It's no more the ready-made. After that, there is another little book which I'm very, this is not, as you can see, it's a very old book, but this is a book which I bought 20 years ago at the flea market in Paris. I was very intrigued by these little books, and I opened it and I discovered this, which is for me the most funny thing in the world. What is it? It's the official, because you see, it's the official guide. I will show it because I have it somewhere. Here it is. This book was in the pocket of the GIs, and when they arrived in France, they were supposed to use it. And this book is funny. Why? Because it's mainly based on phonetics. You see, I want to eat. Je veux manger. You see, I can see if you. I don't know if you can see. Un pince-mangue. Durlaspirine. So the game in France consists, if you don't see the English word, it's very funny for the French to try to understand. For instance, prendre une bang, mieux reposer, say to rest, dormir, have my haircut, mais mieux faire ou payer le cheveu, which we cannot understand at all this phonetics, this phonetics was made for the GI, and we can imagine that the GI at Sainte-Mère-l'Église, which was like this with this book, and I say, comment vous table en français? How do you say table in French? Je suis soldier américain. In phonetics, it's very funny. Well, it's not maybe very funny for you, but for us it was very funny. So we made 10,000 copies of that book, and it was offered for the celebration of the department to Mr. Bush, to Mr. Chirac, and they were all having a lot of fun with this, but it's a testimony and homage to the, of course, to the GIs. After that, I created at the time another company called Mots et Compagnie, and I have made a selection of some of these books here, which maybe will interest you. For instance, this one called Et si on appelait un chat, it was a book to make fun of what I call myself le correctement incorrect, because, for instance, in France, you see now we have this hypocrisy to say on ne dit plus ils ont viré la caissière, mais on dit, on ne doit plus dire ils ont viré la caissière, mais on a décruté l'hôtesse de caisse. On ne dit plus, we don't say anymore a caissière, but une hôtesse de caisse. We don't say virer, or virer means to fire, but décruter l'hôtesse de caisse. Alors, this book was made from an official dictionary, which is called le dictionnaire du vrai français, which, and for instance, maybe you have that in English. We don't say, we cannot say anymore un aveugle, mais un non-voyant. We don't say anymore, alors this one is true, we don't say anymore a ballon, mais un référentiel bondissant. Maybe you have heard of this. This is the official term of the Éducation nationale. We don't say anymore a berger. If you are a berger, that means taking care of the animals. If you have a pay on the payroll, you are not a berger, you are a chef d'exploitation d'élevage de bétail sur sol. This is true. We don't say anymore a balayeur, mais un agent de propreté. You don't say anymore un cancre, mais un élève en difficulté. Un chercheur d'or becomes un ouvrier de l'extraction solide. Un charpentier est un monteur en structure sur bois. Un prisonnier, it's not good to say prisonnier, you must say un client du système carcéral. You don't say, you can say anymore a poissonnier, mais un préparateur des produits de la pêche. That's what you must have on your payroll. You don't say une grosse poitrine, mais un volume mammaire conséquent. That's you don't say un plongeur, you know, the guy who is washing the dishes. C'est un aide de cuisine, hein, etc. So this book, always on the same principle, was to se moquer un peu de cette hypocrisie du nouveau vocabulaire français. Et it has, for instance, let me give you some examples again about this. On dit plus un chômeur, mais un demandeur d'emploi, bien sûr. Et on ne dit... Ah oui, une babysitter doit devenir une employée familiale auprès des enfants. But the best one is if you work moi je dis toujours un camp de nudistes. Hein, moi je ne suis pas un nudiste, mais un camp de nudistes. Mais on ne doit plus dire un camp de nudistes, mais une plage d'habillement optionnel. Hein, tout le monde sait qu'on ne doit plus dire les handicapés, mais les personnes à mobilité réduite. Et les pauvres ne sont plus des pauvres, ce sont des gens économiquement marginalisés. And that is true because that was in an official book called le ROME, R-O-M-E, which is the répertoire officiel des mots à employer. That was one. I made another selection. That, of course, it's still unsuccessful. I made the first book called Wit Spirit 1, l'humour anglo-saxon. After that, I made Wit Spirit 2, and I made many books like this on humor and the Anglo-Saxon humor. It's just, I should say, a selection of the unfortunately, it's in French of the best Anglo-Saxons words which I've selected for many years. For instance, here there is unfortunately a fault because that was the first edition. I speak Esperanto like a native. That was Spike Milligan, I think. Or this one I like it in English. It's thanks God I am an atheist. So I made many. I will give you some more later on. But the best one, which was in the first Wit Spirit. So I made a fun with Wit Spirit because in France we have the White Spirit, as you know, which is something to. White Spirit is something we use pour nettoyer, Wit Spirit, White Spirit. The best one, which is in the first Wit Spirit, is from Robert Burns, which of course, it's one of my favorite humorists. He was explaining to some young people that he was very old, and he said, you know, I'm very, very old. La preuve, c'est que quand j'étais petit, la mer morte n'était que malade. When I was young, the Dead Sea was only sick. And this, I made many other books about. We will come later on with some examples. This is a book which I like. Why? Because this is the only book with made that I was invited once at Bernard Pivot. It was not apostrophe. It was Bouillon de Culture. What is this book? It's a book about what we say in France, les nuances. So, for instance, I made I was trying to find out the difference between nouilles ou pâtes. That's not the same thing. Or no, I'm sorry. Voilà. Médecin ou docteur, vélo ou bicyclette, which is not the same. Sein ou poitrine, which is not the same. We say la poitrine. On ne dit pas la poitrine de la Vierge. On dit les seins de la Vierge. On ne dit pas la poitrine de la Vierge. I was explaining why. We don't say the words congé ou vacances is not the same. Préface and introduction. Baiser ou faire l'amour, it is not the same. Savon ou savonnette. Savon means for me, savon, I was giving the example of Lady Chatterley and Melos. Melos is using savon, and Constance is using savonnette, which means the difference, which explains the difference. Belle ou jolie, it's not the same. Well, it would be too long for me now to give you some examples. Slip or caleçon, it's not the same. Parfum ou eau de toilette, aristocrate ou noble, tisane ou infusion, and so on. So this book, femme ou épouse, that's very interesting. A femme and an épouse. Épouse is more the official. On dit l'épouse du préfet et on dit la femme du plombier. Try why. Try to understand why. I don't know. Paysan ou agriculteur, se laver ou faire sa toilette, manger, déjeuner, dîner ou souper. And this is a book which I like. I like it very much because I had a lot of pleasure to write it down. After that, I published, this is a book which I wrote, but in this company, Mots et Compagnie, which means words and company, it was only about words. I made a lot of books with different authors, like this one, Thierry Leguet, with a famous French teacher. Les poules du couvent couve. You see, that's all the... où les murs sont tels murs le long des murs. These books, and I made a lot, I published a lot of that, of this kind of books, which explain the difference, all the bizarre, des choses bizarres dans la langue française. Les poules du couvent couve, as you can see, it's written, it's what we call a polysemy. Couvent, couve, it's the same writing. Oh, les murs sont tels murs le long des murs. Ou, par exemple, dans les choses qui sont intéressantes dans ce genre de livre, je vais vous faire un... Si on a encore 5 minutes, c'est pas trop tard, je peux continuer encore. It's no? 5 minutes. For instance, if you say in that book, c'est pas grave. I can't move because I am. For instance, if you say Catherine a rapporté un vase de Chine. That's what. You see, Catherine a rapporté un vase de Chine. That's typically very difficult to understand. Un vase de Chine means you don't know if it is un vase de China. Comment on dit un vase? Oui, ou un vase coming back from China. For instance, Cécile, he said in his book, Cécile chante Mozart aussi bien que les Beatles. Does it mean that Cécile chante Mozart aussi bien que les Beatles chantent Mozart, ou elle chante aussi bien Mozart que les Beatles, qu'elle chante les Beatles? That's all the kind of things you can find in that book. Another one in the same principle. This one is interesting. Jean-Claude Rimbaud. Si mon dico m'était compté, just 2 words about this book. C'est this guy, he made a comparison with the Larousse of 1900 and 2000. For instance, at the word demander in the Larousse 1900, demander, example, demander en mariage, and in the Larousse de 2000, demander, example, demander le divorce. Ça, c'est très drôle. So he find out many examples like this. For instance, at the word doigt, you have in 1900 doigt de Dieu, example doigt de Dieu, et en 2000 you have les doigts dans le nez. You can see the difference. For the word fils, dans le Larousse 19 de 1900, you have example le fils de Dieu, and in 2000 you have fils à papa. Rapidly, this one, that was a very successful books too, Lofton Vaticanum and Aeroportum. I don't know if I have time to tell you 2 words about this one. À l'Aeroportum, it's a book which I went to Rome, and in a religious bookstore, I found a very incredible books called Dictionaris Recentis Latinatus, and I found out that there was a lot of words of the daily life which were translated in from Latin to Italian, and I found out, for instance, that the word jazz was translated by Nigritarum Musica. The word jumbo jet was translated Aeronavis Gigantea, ketchup Solani Esculentis Succus, Kleenex, leasing, McDonald, Filius Donaldis. So I was very So I went to the sister who was running the shop and said, "What is that book?" And it was a big book called, written by a Monsignore called Monsignor Heger. And she said, "You know, it's the first dictionary of recent Latin, because if there is a conclave, if the Pope dies, or if there is a big meeting with all the bishops or archbishops or the cardinal of the world, they must talk in Latin. And of course, in the old dictionaries, you don't have the translation of the modern Latin. So they had translated all these books, like Scooter, Birotula Motoria, Slalom Géant, Ingens Descendus Flexus. So I found that so funny that I decided, and I did another one for the Conclave, Loftum Vaticanum. So I decided to make a book using these books, using this translation. For instance, so it is like school books. In Recordatium Tabernacula, dans la boutique de souvenirs. Benedicte aquae vasculum erectorium abes, avez-vous un atomiseur d'eau bénite? Quel parfum me recommandez-vous pour être en odeur de sainteté? Quale ugentum mihi suades ut olam sancte? Je vous conseille Saint-Laurent, Sanctum Laurentium tibi suado. Ou another one, Spero nimbo super tunicam talarem meam lavationné et vacéré. J'espère que les auréoles sous ma soutane partiront au lavage. Bon, this book was very. J'ai eu un très bon accueil by the Latin teachers, and they use it to learn Latin with to teach Latin to their pupils. This book's difficult to explain it, but it's a book which I like. It's a story. I wrote a book which is quite serious. I have invented the life of a word from when he comes from the larynx. I had the idea from a sentence of Victor Hugo who say, le mot est un être vivant. So I imagine that the mot, a mot who was telling his life, and he said, I was born in the larynx, and I went to school, and my teacher was a very bad lady called La Grammaire, and after that, and it was, that's the second time I was invited again with, to the emission of Bernard Pivot. Now, I don't want to take of your precious time. This one, great success. I take same principle. I bought the right of, in English I think it's a Smurf. I bought the rights of Les Schtroumpfs, and I made, you see, for instance, each time I was saying, when there was a problem, I was saying the word Schtroumpf. For instance, here, à table, le Schtroumpf est ouvert. Est-ce que c'est le grill avec deux ailes ou le grill avec un aile? En réalité, c'est le grill avec un aile. Ici, on dit, alors, si je comprends bien, monsieur a décidé de reprendre ses Schtroumpfs. Est-ce que c'est pérégrination ou pérégrination? On a toujours tendance à tous ces pérégrinations et ces pérégrinations. Anxiolytique, ici, la last one. Ça suffit pour aujourd'hui, nous allons schtroumpfer la séance. Alors, est-ce que c'est clôturer ou clore la séance? En réalité, c'est clore la séance. So, I am giving the answers at the end of the book. That is, alors, that's another one. Antigone de la Nouille, that's all the what we call in France the pearls that the bookstores, les libraires have heard in all the funny thing they hear in their bookstores. For instance, Antigone de la Nouille instead of Antigone d'Anouille. Or, do you have les oiseaux se crachent pour mourir instead of les oiseaux se cachent pour mourir? So that's a book which was quite successful too. Another one. So, je voudrais à la recherche du pain perdu au lieu instead of le temps perdu, et port à crédit instead of mort à crédit. So this Alors, ça c'est encore like With Spirit and With Spirit 1, One Spirit 2, So Irresistible et So Incredible. C'est encore des perles de l'humour anglo-saxon. I'm going just to give you some of them. For instance, one of course, you have Stephen Wright, you have Woody Allen, Henry Youngman, Groucho Marx, who says, j'ai passé une excellente soirée, mais ce n'était pas celle-ci. Ou Woody Allen, who says, on n'a jamais vu un aveugle dans un camp de nudistes. Ou Phyllis Diller qui dit, quand je vais à la plage, même la mer se retire. Ou Stephen Wright, who says, quand tout le monde fait comme vous, c'est que vous vous êtes trompé de fil. Charles Lamb, quand on se promène dans un cimetière, on a des raisons de se demander où sont enterrés les salauds. Ça, c'est très, très joli. Last one for the road. Rita Mae Brown. Si Michel-Ange n'avait pas été homosexuel, la chapelle Sixtine aurait été peinte en blanc au rouleau et en 2 jours, l'affaire aurait été réglée. Voilà. Alors, ça, c'est suite et fin. That's my last book, which was published 6 months ago. Je me suis amusé to resume some classic of the literature like Madame Bovary, Cyrano de Bergerac, and some books more recent like Le Diable s'habille en Prada or Histoire d'eau, Harry Potter, and I'm inventing some new endings which were supposed to be funny. For instance, just one to give you an example. Madame Bovary, I'm mixing the end of Madame Bovary and Monsieur de Rênal, c'est Madame Bovary, je ne sais plus avec quoi je l'ai mixé, Madame Bovary et just to give you an idea, j'ai fait les particules élémentaires, la case de l'oncle Tom, le rouge et le noir, yes. For instance, I'm imagining that rouge et noir and Stendhal and Madame Bovary and I'm mixing imagining 2 endings that Monsieur de Rênal, which is a widower, and Monsieur Bovary is a widower too. They are very sad. One as Monsieur Bovary a perdu sa femme, Monsieur de Rênal a aussi perdu sa femme dans le rouge et le noir, et they both decide to get some rest in an auberge in Normandy, and they don't know each other, and they meet in this auberge, and they think they discover that they like each other, and they discover their homosexuality, and Monsieur de Rênal and Mr. Bovary s'en vont tous les deux, and they are very happy. Last one, rapidly, mais j'ai pas le temps. I think that's a book which is this is here. Les mots qui me font rire. I could give you many examples, but I think we don't have time. All the bizarreries of the French language. Le coup de Chiflet, ça c'est le coup de Chiflet, c'est. I would say it's my. Everybody knows the Miscellaneous, and this is a Miscellaneous, which is a book which was very successful in England. Le coup de Chiflet is a book which I have found out many funny things about everything. Like for instance, les prénoms des 20 enfants de Bach. Il faut savoir que Bach a eu 20 enfants, and I found out that the first name of each of these the 20 children. For instance, les horaires de l'Orient Express. Tout le monde s'en fout, mais c'est très drôle. Le nom de la capitale du Daghestan, la durée du coït chez la souris, la devise de la Suisse, etc. So, c'est un livre, as the journalist say, it's complètement inutile et complètement utile. On n'en a rien à faire, mais en même temps, quand on l'a, on est très content. Ça, c'est typiquement du Chiflet. Et je termine avec ça, je voulais amener, ça c'est le grand succès de ma maison d'édition maintenant. J'ai inventé ce qu'on appelle les cahiers de vacances pour adultes. Because as you maybe know, in France, we have the cahiers de vacances pour les enfants. And during summer, you take that for the children. They can improve, they can work during the holidays. We have invented, it's serious and funny in the same time. You have some question on French histoire, and it's so we sold 300,000 copies of this one. This one, which is the first one. This one, that's winter. This one just came out. C'est les cahiers de vacances pour les week-ends pluvieux, and it's a real success. It's always on the same principle. Questions drôles, mais réponses sérieuses. Par exemple, voici quelques phrases prononcées par des hommes politiques français, et elles sont mélangées. Il faut réattribuer qui a dit quoi, Charles de Gaulle, Valéry Giscard d'Estaing ou François Mitterrand. Voilà, j'ai peur que ça soit très tard. J'avais beaucoup d'autres choses à vous dire. I'm sorry, but I'm very mixed up with the jet lag and my poor English. So I would prefer to stop now and to thank you very much to have been here on a weekend. And I'm sorry I've been registered because I think nothing has been... je pense que vous avez absolument pas compris ce que j'ai dit en mélangeant le français et l'anglais. Et j'ai fait une conversation qui était vraiment very informal, so informal that maybe you have not understood everything. Thank you very much. Voilà, c'était très long, non? That's the way that my friend, some of my books are signed Jean-Loup Whistle, yes.
So if you would like to, we can have open the floor for 2 questions maybe, and then once we're done with the questions, we'll push the screen back and pull this table out, and if you want to purchase books and have book signing, that's where we'll do it, and of course I think there's a few more drinks maybe.
Thank you.
First question?
Yes.
I have a question. Maybe you could illustrate a bit for me. I think there's a tendency in French to sometimes juxtapose the word, take the beginning,
Yes.
switch it over, kind of what we call in American pig Latin
Yes.
type of expression. What?
Le verlan, yes, we. I'm very. Yes, it's. You have that in English too. You call that pig what?
Well, we have something called pig Latin. But
Yes.
It's just what children do. They just
Yes.
take the first
I'm very bad in verlan, but it's very it works very well in France. I never, even my children are too big, but my great children are too small. But the verlan, I'm fascinated by verlan, but I am unable to invent any word in verlan. It's too difficult for me. Comme je suis très mauvais aussi en crosswords and things like that. You want to find out if it exists in France too?
Well, no? I know it exists in French. I'm just curious if you know about the origin of it.
I don't know. I don't know. No, I don't know. I think it's. On dit toujours, we always say that it starts in what we call les banlieues, like the rap music or things like this. But it's one of my master, Mr. Alain Ray, which is a great linguist in France, said it's very interesting because it can be a complete new language, you say, but I don't know the origin. No. Yes.
When I started learning French, I had a French girlfriend, and she showed me Asterix.
Yes.
And she tried to explain to me. She found it very funny. I couldn't understand the words, but it was very, very good apposition of words, even in their names. Ultimately, I thought was very.
Yes. Yes, because she was talking to you like Asterix in Latin de cuisine, as we say. You couldn't understand the word. And yes, Yes, it's very, but Asterix is still very successful. You see, I have no time I wanted to tell you about that book, Les mots qui me font rire, which was not published by me, but by Le Seuil 1 year ago. And I have pointed out all the bizarreries. That was mainly what I wanted to tell you about tonight. But just an example, for instance. And it's funny because in my introduction, I'm saying, I'm talking about l'Alliance Française. I say French, it's so difficult to learn. And I have pointed out in that book all the difficulties of the French language. And I say it's very, very, I can understand that in Alliance Française, in Tegucigalpa, I say Atlanta, the teachers must have a lot of difficulty to teach French because there are so many bizarre things. For instance, here is le mot, what I call le mot à tout faire. And I have pointed out all the sense, different meanings of voilà. Me voilà riche means now I'm rich. Et voilà means ça y est. En voilà une idée. Quelle drôle d'idée. Voilà, voilà, j'arrive. Et aussitôt me voilà à rire de bon cœur. Je me mets à rire de bon cœur. Il s'est marié, voilà 3 ans. Il y a 3 ans. Qui voilà? Qui vient? Je crois que voilà la solution. Je crois que j'ai trouvé la solution. And so on. Just I have pointed out all the things which I thought that if I was learning French nowadays, I would become completely crazy. And that will be my conclusion. I just find les mots qui existent qu'au pluriel. That's incredible. Like cuissard et représailles, only at pluriel. Victuailles seulement au pluriel. Les obsèques seulement au pluriel. Et comment voulez-vous apprendre ça en français? Voilà. And last one, les mots en drôle de coupe. Un carabin, la carabine n'est pas la femme du carabin. La mandarine n'est pas la femme du mandarin. Comment voulez-vous expliquer ça à l'Alliance française? La capucine n'est pas la femme du capucin. La pèlerine n'est pas la femme du pèlerin. Et la camelote n'est pas la femme du camelot. Voilà. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.